Hello and welcome to Mike's Garage. If you've already subscribed to our channel, thank you very much. If you haven't, please do, and when you do, be sure and tap on the notification bell. That way you'll be notified every time one of our new videos comes up. And if you tap on the little like button, we appreciate that too. All right, we started this project quite a while back. And like I normally say, life gets in the way and we have to do all the things we have to do. Luckily, my life consists of motorcycles, so it means take care of that one or that one and put that one back on the back shelf. Well, I'm getting back at it, and to get this thing done is going to take a lot of time. So we'll be stretching it out, and we'll get interruptions all the way through. And again, that's just the way my life runs, and I enjoy it, so there's no complaints in it. Anyway, this is my 1940 Flathead 80 motor. People like to call it an engine. We'll call it an engine. That's proper. But slang is to call it a motor. Anyway, this Flathead 80 motor is something that people have asked a lot about, and I've asked a lot about it myself. I haven't put one of these big 80s together in a long time. And this particular one, since I'm building it for my own bike, I can't help but hop it up some. So I'm doing a lot of research as I go, talking to a lot of guys that are older than me. That's pretty old, and that's just what it takes, because I want to get all the tricks and treats down, because a hopped up motor is just more fun to ride. They're just more playful, like me. So first, for a minute here, let's talk about what a flathead is. Basically, the heads are flat on the inside. There's no valves in them. All they are is a cover, like your lawnmower engine. This is a combustion chamber. And here is a valve, the spark plug. And that's basically where all the compression and explosion, burn, all that stuff happens. Now, the size of that chamber has to do with the compression ratio that you have. And you can't run a real high compression ratio on a flathead, and I will show why. Again, these are the heads. I feel very fortunate. They made them in cast iron and aluminum. These are aluminums. They're the high compression set of the day, and high compression is about 5 to 1. This is a cylinder, and it weighs a ton. Unlike a motor with overhead valves, these valves come up from the bottom. So the valve pockets are right here. Piston, of course, is right here. Now, if we were to raise the compression, we wouldn't be allowing enough room for flow of air and fuel in here. So it's kind of a balancing act to raise the compression a little, but not too much, and to cut this area down here down so that you can run more air and fuel across, because it runs across to the piston, to the cylinder. So this area right here, and this one's been relieved. In other words, this originally was flat across here. Someone has ground it down for more flow. We may grind it down more, which will effectively lower the compression. However, it will create more flow. Again, a balancing act in a flathead. These engines were not built for high performance. They weren't built for racing, although Harley did race some. They were smaller ones, and they proved a lot of interesting facts while doing that. But, be that as it may, that's the way it has to be done. Now, we can also increase the flow with using Wilder cams, and we are going to have cams ground for this engine. Now, here's the other cylinder, just for fun. The valves have been removed, so you can see what it looks like with the valves out. Intake is right here. Exhaust is over here. Again, the same relief in this one as that one. And we may be increasing that a little bit. We'll see. I'm still doing research to find out the best for what I want to do. I don't want to build a wild motor. I'd like to build a mild motor. Okay, moving right along. I know I'm going from the top down instead of the bottom up on this. I felt it would be a little more interesting to show. These are the cases. This is the cam cover. Pull it open to expose it here. As you can see, there's 4 bushings in here, and this is where the cams go. Being a flathead, it has 4 cams, much like a modern Sportster has. In fact, the Sportsters are really a carryover from the old flathead days in design. So this thing runs 4 cams. Here the cams are. 1 cam lobe for each valve. And all the gears to tie them together. This one to drive the oil pump. This one to drive the distributor or the magneto. And I think we're going to put a magneto on this one. These are the oil pumps. Flatheads, these old flatheads all have 2 oil pumps. This is the feed pump, which goes right here on the cam cover and is driven off of this cam. That's the feed pump. This is the return pump. It goes up from the bottom and is also driven off one of the cams. And that's the one that returns the oil. We may be going to a high-performance feed pump. I don't know yet. We're still playing with that. But that's how they work. Now, the other subtle differences in these old flatheads is, of course, their earlier design than anything we're used to. This is a modern 80-inch Evolution piston. This is a flathead 80 piston. Absolutely different. Different in weight. We may be using some lightweight pistons in it. I'm not really sure yet. Moving right along, one of the things I wanted to do was to increase the stroke in this. That's still open for discussion. Now, to increase the stroke in the old days, you couldn't just call up and order a pair of S&S or Truett and Osborne flywheels. They weren't in existence yet. So the way a flathead, or the way these flywheels are, they had a long stroke to begin with. In fact, all of the dimensions in it is different than modern stuff. For example, this is a pair of shovel head connecting rods, a pair I used to run in one of my hot rod motors. These are flathead 80 rods, and you can see the rod itself is about 1/2 inch longer. I don't remember the exact measurement, but that's because of the dynamics of them and how they work. These big flathead motors were built for doing heavy work. They make loads and loads of torque. And with loads and loads of torque that they wanted, they used heavy flywheels. The heavy flywheels, according to the laws of physics, a flywheel is an object to store energy. In other words, you get those flywheels moving, they'll move the bike after you quit giving it gas. Big flywheels. So these are very heavy flywheels. The stock stroke was a little over 4¼ inches. I wanted to stroke it to 4½. And the way that was done in the old days, here is a stock flywheel. Here is a stock crank pin. Rods go on the crank pin, then they bolt in between the flywheels. Notice that there's a step here. So, an old friend of mine, Mr. Clell Richards, some of the old timers will remember Clell. He owned House of Horsepower. They made crankcases, all sorts of things. Very interesting man and a really good friend and a nice guy. And he passed a few years ago. We don't have Clell anymore. But he was quite a guy. Anyway, so here is the stock location. for the crank pin. Let's see. Here we go. So if we wanted to move that hole, we would go to a guy like Clell, and you can see the outline here. He actually offsets that hole and machines it to a larger size, actually a larger taper. So at that point, I'm just using old crank pins for demonstration purposes here. So at that point, yeah, you can see it on that one. You can see the outline real well on that one. So it's been enlarged and moved, actually moved off center, so that now we have to use a bigger crank pin, and all you use is just a later model crank pin because they're bigger. They don't have the step in them. See the difference? So there's the large diameter, drops right in there, and moves that whole flywheel almost a quarter, or the whole stroke almost a quarter of an inch more, increasing the displacement of the engine. So we'll be, I think with the bore I'm using and the stroke I'm using, we'll be up around about 86 cubic inches. Remembering that when you increase a stroke, you're increasing torque, because that longer length of movement actually is like a bigger lever. So it should be a lot of fun to ride. And if it doesn't all work out, we won't be doing that. We'll just put it together stock. We can do it one way or the other. It's still going to be warmed over some. But I just wanted to give a quick trip through this motor before I sit down with a machinist and make all the plans for what we're really going to do here. But we got it all out on the table. We're going for it. We'll be doing a lot of other projects at the same time. So don't be bummed out if I get started and stop and started and stop, because that's what it takes. And it's okay with me. So I'll be getting on this thing and getting over to see my machinist friend, and we'll be doing some serious talking. And until then, I'll see you out on the road.